Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
It doesn't matter how low Michigan is in the rankings. Ryan Day has to win on Saturday. Also on Sunday, we'll find out just how good the Minnesota Vikings are, and the Ravens climb back to the top of the AFC North to face the Philadelphia Eagles. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
It wouldn't be Thanksgiving in college football without the game, the rivalry, Ohio State, Michigan, a little bit of the luster off what looked like it could have been in the beginning of the season, a really titanic matchup between these two squads, Ohio State and Michigan, though, creeping in opposite directions. Ohio State coming off a 38-15 drubbing of number 5 Indiana. Jay Stevens from Locked On Buckeyes joins me now. And Jay, is it too glass half empty to say that because Michigan and Ohio State are so separated right now that puts even more pressure on Ohio State to get a win given the recent history in this matchup?
That's an interesting question. I was going to say the pressure's there no matter what, no matter which way you look at it, the pressure's there for numerous reasons. The rivalry itself, you want to snap this 3-game losing streak. You haven't beaten Michigan since 2019. Ohio State's one of their goals every year is to win the conference. They have to win this game to solidify their spot, to have a shot to win and play in the Big Ten championship. So I think the pressure is there no matter what. I think the pressure is one thing that Ryan Day has embraced this year in a way that I thought he might crack under pressure. The players have come back to school and said, no, we're going to go out and try to do some things we've never done. Well, they have a shot this weekend to do something they've never done, which is beat Michigan, because a lot of those guys that could have gone to the NFL, they don't have that win against their arch rival, which fuels them to win this weekend. I think you got to see that fuel a little bit against Indiana this past weekend, where Indiana's coach Curt Cignetti's been talking a lot of trash all season long. He talked trash even game day, and he kind of got that cigarette put out by Will Howard. I understand why Will Howard did that. The pressure's there no matter what. Like, forget that game this past weekend. It's all about this weekend against Michigan. And the pressure's there no matter which way you want to look at it. The pressure's already at an all-time high.
It also seems like it might be a little bit of a lose-lose. I don't mean to come to this so cynically, but because Michigan is not as good, if you win, it doesn't feel quite as sweet. Like, the expectation is that you're going to win, and then it'll be, did they win by enough? And because those kinds of things matter to the committee, that's something that gets litigated here. So if you're Ryan Day, how do you guard against that piece of this?
I think that's the more like outside of the fan base narrative, where how big do you win matters. Michigan's not as good. And so with them being down, even if you're expected to win and you win, a win doesn't really mean a whole lot. I think to the fan base and to the team, winning is everything. There are even players
win by one, and the fans will go, "We won." Doesn't matter.
Correct. Absolutely, because that 3-game losing streak means something to this fan base, means something to Ryan Day, and a lot of fans are ready to kick Ryan Day out of Columbus, Ohio, because if you can't beat Michigan, why are you here? And so I do think that when you look at the fan base and the team itself, this matters. A 1-point win is still a win, and that absolutely matters. So, yeah, the committee's going to have their own narrative, but to Ryan Day and these players, a win is what must happen.
And so, okay, there is something bigger here. I don't think you can ever have this rivalry be a trap game, right? But Ohio State probably thinking also down the line, they have national championship aspirations. So in a situation like this, how do you stay focused? How do you stay in this understanding that you might not need your A game? These are still 20, 21-year-old kids. Yeah. You might not need your A game this week. How do you stay in it?
The fuel over the past few years. Now, there's newcomers like Will Howard, like Caleb Downs, that didn't have this rivalry be fueling them when they got in college, freshman, sophomore, junior year for Will Howard. So they're newcomers to this. But Will Howard's already embraced the entire fan base and said, this week is for those guys that stayed in school. This week is for the fan base that's been hurting. He's felt the hurt. He heard about the rivalry as soon as he got on campus for his visit. So I understand looking at the national championship and even looking a week from now to potentially in the Big Ten championship, but focusing on the game, focusing on the winged helmets, focusing on what Michigan has done the past 3 years. I think that's going to be enough to fuel everybody on the team inside the practice facility to be able to say, look, forget the outside noise. Forget all that other nonsense. All we got to focus on is this game and this team and beating them. And that's all we got to focus on to fuel us for the biggest game of the weekend.
It would be totally human for the guys on this team, the coaches, the fans to go, we just want Oregon. We just want another crack at Oregon. And they can't do that. We know they can't do that. This is something I've been thinking about this week, Jay. With all of the name, image, and likeness and the re-engineering of all of these conferences, we are losing some of the rivalries that really from time immemorial have fueled college football. This is not one of them. And this is a game that it seems like we're going to get forever, hopefully, God willing. And in a way, it seems like there's something riding on this moment in college football to say, hey, Michigan, just like don't lose by 30. Make this a game. Show us that rivalries still matter, because if you're a purist, these things are important. You just spent 5 minutes talking about how much you have to instill in your players that this rivalry is the thing, and you have to be focused on the rivalry. I don't know if it matters the same, and it'd be nice if the guys went out there and showed us that it does still matter.
I think they will. I believe they will. And it could be a Michigan defeat by 30. It could be a Michigan may lose by 30. And
that may be proof that it mattered to Ohio State, right?
Yeah, correct. I think in this year, it's one of the odd years where this rivalry matters to everybody out there, coaches, players, everybody that's on the field. But I think the talent discrepancy is one of those things where Michigan's talent is so down, and they don't have a quarterback, and their offense is suspect, and they have some good pieces on offense and on defense. But in totality, Michigan is not a great football team. They might be an average football team, but they're not great. Where you're going up against Ohio State, who has added fuel, but they're also playing like a great football team right now. So it's one of those areas where the rivalry matters to everyone there. But by the outcome of it, by the end of Saturday afternoon, you may be looking like, Ohio State won 45-3. Like, does this rivalry still matter? Absolutely, it matters. It just shows the talent gap between Ohio State and Michigan right now.
You can stay up to date all year on the Ohio State Buckeyes by subscribing to Locked On Buckeyes and, of course, Locked On Sports Today on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. We hope you had a great Thanksgiving. Plenty of NFL action coming up as we get you set on a Football Friday. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. And that winning $5 bet could come on some Sunday NFL action. The Vikings, 3.5-point favorites over the Cardinals on Sunday. Meanwhile, the Ravens, 2.5-point favorites at home over the Eagles. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Two of the best teams in the NFL square off on Sunday. A potential Super Bowl preview, Mid-Atlantic style. Baltimore Ravens against the Philadelphia Eagles. Two teams very much who believe they can win in their conference. Kevin Ostreicher from Locked On Ravens joins me. And Kevin, this is a Ravens team coming off a big win on Monday Night Football. They've had their issues, Baltimore, over the course of the season, but they seem to be catching their stride here at the right time. Their passing defense played well on Monday night. They are going to need that unit to play their best if they want to stop Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, who is a potential offensive player of the year, along with Derrick Henry, by the way, in Baltimore, and this passing attack in Philadelphia. How do you expect them to fare in this one? Because that seems like the key matchup here.
Yeah, I think this is going to be just a slugfest, offensively and defensively.
Yeah.
I think with these two teams, you have two really great run defense. Philadelphia's pass defense is a lot better than Baltimore's right now. I think we can all acknowledge that with the production they've got out of guys like Kenyon Mitchell and others as well. Like everybody's making hay in that Eagles secondary. But talk about Derrick Henry, talk about Saquon or Saquads, if you want to call him that too. That's an acceptable nickname here. Those two guys are going to go head to head. And I know, look, the Ravens maybe had interest in Saquon. The Eagles maybe had interest in Derrick Henry. Obviously, it goes the opposite way. And I think both guys have been perfect fits for their teams. And one of the big things I'm looking for personally, when you talk about Philly's offense versus Baltimore's defense, is we know how much the Eagles love to use Saquon as a receiver and how much of that is his game and how he can get out into space, use him on screen passes. You can put him anywhere on the field and he can produce. For Baltimore, they've sometimes had trouble covering running backs and tight ends out of the backfield. You know, sometimes it can be masked with, is the running back the best weapon on the team? And is there really not anybody else that you have to pay attention to? Well, that's not the case with Philadelphia's offense, where you have to worry about A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith if he's able to play in this game, right? Those are guys you have to always be aware of who's on the field. And with Baltimore, one of the big players is Roquan Smith, who missed Monday night's game against the Chargers. While he hasn't been great in coverage this year, his presence does make a lot of difference on the field just in general. So to me, I think that you're looking at a matchup between two teams, and obviously that's not even, we haven't even talked about, I haven't even mentioned Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts yet, who I know you talked about, but two quarterbacks who Lamar's in the MVP conversation. I know Jalen Hurts has had up and down moments this season, but I still think he's a very good quarterback, right? Yeah. So at the end of the day, two very high-powered offenses and two very high-powered defenses, I think is going to be an absolute battle.
Yeah, and the two most productive running backs in the NFL this year, Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry, no one within 200 yards of those guys right now in the NFL. They've been the two best running backs by far so far this season. So, you know, pick your poison. It doesn't matter. Okay, Derrick Henry or Saquon Barkley. They've both been excellent. For the Ravens, they've been able to find different ways to win. We've seen the Eagles do the same, whether it's Saquon Barkley on the ground or Jalen Hurts. Hey, let's just chuck it up to A.J. Brown 4 times and see if we can make this all work here. I think the question, not just this week, but for the entire season is, can the Ravens defense make enough plays in this game to be a true blue, not just AFC, but Super Bowl contender? In a matchup like this, what do you want to see out of Baltimore that makes you go, even if they, let's say they lose 35-31 or something like that, what would make you go, okay, I think this is going in the right direction. They can still make this work. What do you want to see there?
Well, I think just hanging tough first and foremost is one. I mean, obviously, if you get blown out by a team like Philadelphia and they just take it to you at will,
that's not great.
Yeah, that doesn't really inspire much confidence in you. But if they hang tough, and honestly, if they show stride still, like if that pass defense can hold A.J. Brown in check and the Eagles pass catching weapons in check, and you know if it's a Saquon Barkley beats you game, but then again the Ravens have a really good run defense, so if they can hold him in check and it just turns into this like whose offensive weapons are better or who just performs late down the stretch, maybe it comes down to a kicker battle between two greats. Well, I guess one great and then Jake Elliott, but Justin Tucker's not having a great season. No. Jake Elliott was great for a while, but Jake Elliott has really struggled this season. It has not been good for Jake Elliott.
Tell my fantasy football team.
I don't have many more. I did, but that is long in the past. But to me, I think that if you can hang tough with a team like Philadelphia, you mentioned a potential Super Bowl preview down the line. I don't think that's too far out of the question. I know Detroit Lions fans might have something to say, maybe in the AFC, Kansas City fans, Chiefs, Buffalo Bills, fans, whoever, all those teams. But I think these are two of the teams that have so much talent on both sides of the ball, but get almost overlooked in a way. I know Philly is getting a lot of respect right now because obviously they've been on a tear, but I think in the AFC, you look to teams like Kansas City and Buffalo nationally, right? NFC, it's all about Detroit. But in reality, Baltimore and Philly could be a big Super Bowl matchup. And so I think if Lamar Jackson's able to do his thing, Derrick Henry can get going. But honestly, the big thing, Peter, I'll say is if they can win in the trenches, if the offensive line plays well, and if the defensive line is able to hold their spot, get pressure on Jalen Hurts, and impacts the run game, that to me is where it's won and lost for a team. And if they can do enough to at least stay in the game, and sure, let's say they lose, if they perform well in the trenches, I think that that's a good enough reason for me to say, hey, Baltimore is a contender and they could go a really long way in the playoffs.
I know that we're talking about a guy who's a 2-time MVP, who's coming the reigning league MVP. But there are questions about Lamar Jackson and his ability to come through in big games in the postseason. This is not a playoff game. This is not even a conference game for the Baltimore Ravens. But this is one of the best defenses in the league, especially over the last 2 months. The Philadelphia Eagles lead the league in yards allowed, all those things. How much pressure do you think is on Lamar Jackson to perform in a showcase game like this?
I think there's always pressure, but I think Lamar handles it well in a lot of different spots. Now, obviously, there are times where he doesn't. We've certainly seen that over the course of his career. I'm not saying he's a perfect player. Nobody is. But I think when you look at the big matchups, these are matchups the Ravens get up for. And it's kind of a scary thing because the matchups they don't get up for in the regular season are against teams they should be just blowing out. And then they somehow Gardner Minshew is the owner of the Baltimore Ravens, apparently. So these are games that Lamar usually does get up for and the Ravens usually do get up for. And I think when you talk about a team, for example, like Dallas in week 3, it's a game everybody was looking forward to. And this was before, obviously, Dallas did the whole
spiraled. Yeah, they did the whole Cowboys thing.
Yeah, spiraled away. But that was a game that everybody was kind of doubting the Ravens, doubting Lamar. Okay, Dak and CD are going to cook, and this defense is awesome. When in reality, they only have a couple of stars on that team, and the rest is kind of, you're throwing stuff at a wall and hoping it sticks. Mm-hmm. This is a different game because Philly has talent in all 3 phases. But I think the Ravens relish these moments, and they see, and plus Lamar just loves playing the NFC in general. He's only lost once, and that's to Daniel Jones, who the time we're recording this, he's not, but maybe by the time this comes out, he's a member of the Ravens and he's their backup quarterback. So to me, I think that Baltimore and Lamar, I know there are questions about it, and I know a lot of those questions have to be answered in the playoffs. There's nothing in the regular season Lamar can do to quiet those narratives, but the best he can do is show up, put his team in the best position to win, and get his team in the best shot to get as high of a seed as they can to hopefully go on a run as we get towards the playoffs.
You can stay up to date all year on the Baltimore Ravens by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Ravens on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, just how good are the Minnesota Vikings? Sunday's game against the Arizona Cardinals could tell us. Because the Detroit Lions have just torn down everything in their path, it has gone a little bit unnoticed that just nipping at their heels, the Minnesota Vikings are 9-2 after a 30-27 overtime win. That a game they nearly gave away, by the way, to the Chicago Bears. Luke Braun from Locked On Vikings joins me now. And Luke, it's another big matchup in the NFC playoff race because the 9-2 Vikings take on the Arizona Cardinals, who are right in the thick of not just the NFC West, but the playoff race in general, although they probably can't sneak in unless they win that NFC West. This Vikings team not quite playing at the level they were early in the season, but still winning games. How are they doing it?
I think they have kind of returned to a little bit of that form, at least in the down-to-down way, right? The way every game has been this year has sort of followed this same principle that they're, to put it statistically, their success rate deviates from their EPA a lot. And what does that tell you? That tells you that down to down, they're finding a lot of successful plays. They're keeping the chains moving. They're, on defense, they are keeping the offense behind schedule and winning a lot of plays. But then they're ruining all their games with they just can't stop having these little turnover-y moments or these little meltdowns. So it's, 27 out of 30 dropbacks are great. And the other 3 are so disastrous that they bring the other team back into the game. It's been that way kind of all year long. And it's, the Rams and Lions were able to take those opportunities in a way nobody else has. So what I think it has to be for Arizona is that when those moments present themselves, when the Vikings present those opportunities, which they will, they have not proven a capability not to, then Kyler Murray or Marvin Harrison or whoever it is needs to take that opportunity, needs to seize it and needs to make it the moment of the game and, not drop the pass, not screw up the protection or make it another big problem.
Yeah, and this Cardinals defense by success rate has been terrible all season. This was something that a month and a half ago we talked about with the Packers going in there. Their defense is playing better. This Vikings defense, you and I talked about this with the crossover. We talked about this at various times with Locked On Sports Today. Brian Flores continues to find ways to manufacture defense in a way that we think usually of offensive coaches manufacturing offense. But some of the things that happened at the end of last year where offenses seem to have some answers, despite the Bears putting up 27 on them this last week, not happening the same way this year. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, it's not the same. I could go into a very long diatribe about what they've changed about their coverages and what they've changed about their fronts.
Subscribe to Locked On Vikings if you want.
Yeah, stay tuned. All right, stay tuned to that. But basically, they've covered a few more of their bases, and I think the defense is a more complete thought than it was last year. Last year it was very experimental. It was very, we'll just let the flats be open. We'll figure that out later, right? And it was kind of figuring a lot of stuff out on the fly. Even in season, they were making changes and adjustments that papered over these really crazy. I mean, they had Keenan Allen go for 200 yards in a game. Like, there were problems that they had to kind of solve on the fly. And so it's a little bit more complete. There's a little bit like there are beaters like there are for any defense, but there's not like true exploits, I think, in the same way. They have had, they'll have moments where guys in coverage just super screw up, guys that get beat, right? I mean, Shaq Griffin, Stephon Gilmore on the outside, if you can find that one-on-one and exploit it, like teams have gotten production on that. But they've done a really good job of getting their own kind of explosive defensive plays, be they sacks, good TFLs, turnovers, to keep things up. And right now, they and the Lions, by EPA per play, are the best two defenses in the league. That's it. No exceptions, no splits, no. They're the best two defense in the league, are the two in the NFC North.
Yeah, as the Locked On Packers host, to that I say, cool. Offensively, I think if you're building the case as an Eagles fan, a Packers fan, a Cardinals fan, a Buccaneers fan, a Falcons fan, you're going Sam Darnold. Like, it's the Jesse Pinkman meme. He can't keep getting away with this, right? Like, why?
Well, he doesn't.
Why should anyone trust this team with Sam Darnold?
Yeah, there's 2 or 3 turnovers a game. You basically just take that as a given, and can they win anyways? And they have 9 out of 11 times. Or turnover, I would say turnover opportunities. But look at like the Vikings-Packers game, right? Opening drive. One of those turnover opportunities, Edrin Cooper drops it. Yeah, that's an extraordinarily important moment. And teams that can, you have 3 turnovers in the first half against, I think it was the Colts, right? Or the Jaguars. That game, they only scored 12 points in that game, right? And they only win that game because Mac Jones is a catastrophe on the other side. So yeah, those moments are key. Those moments are so important that you have to be opportunistic. So the opportunistic defenses are going to be able to kind of keep in this one. So if the Cardinals can be opportunistic, even if the Vikings march up and down the field on them, a goal line fumble, right? A stupid interception in the red zone. The Vikings have had red zone woes. And on the defensive side of the ball, they've had 2-minute woes. So some of these situational things, if you can find a way to really apply pressure to those sort of joints in the armor, then you can keep this thing a game against a team that otherwise in the normal situations has been humming. The more normal the game is, the better it is for the Vikings. That's not good news historically.
Well, that's because this team, as you have said many times, it seemed over the last few years, just be normal, just be cool.
Please be normal. The more normal they are, the better it goes. They were very normal against the Titans. That game had no drama.
Right. Well, normal. Kyler Murray is not bread and butter in terms of normal, and Sam Darnold, not his bread and butter. So expect some chaos, expect some fun. That's the beauty of November football in the NFL. Luke, appreciate the time, man. You can stay up to date all year on the Minnesota Vikings by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Vikings on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. And finally, the New York Jets are bringing in some help to find their next franchise leaders, aiding Aaron Rodgers in his search. Just kidding, kind of, I think. Aiding Woody Johnson in the latest Jets reboot will be a familiar face. The 33rd Team, a media company founded by former Jets GM Mike Tannenbaum in 2019, has been retained by the team to provide data analysis and experience in searches for head coaches and general managers. Time is a flat circle. Although maybe the more appropriate metaphor for the Jets is time is standing still. It's been the same for, 50 years or so, maybe 60. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're a new subscriber to Locked On Sports Today, we're here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports Today, can the Broncos avoid any Jameis magic? So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
Go to our video on demand. Click on sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.